Welcome to Tabletop Tommies. I'm Jonny.
And I'm Phil. And we're back. Hello. We haven't been here for a while. Sorry for that. We have been busy behind the scenes getting ready for V3 and getting ready for September. But we are back and we are joined tonight by Ali.
Yay! Thanks for having me on, guys. I would love to use one of those corny lines like long-time listener, first-time caller, but no.
He doesn't listen.
I just don't have enough time to listen to all the episodes you guys have put out. Along with all the other sort of social media producers that we have at the moment, there seems to be a lot of people talking about bolt action.
Yeah, and there's been a lot more in the last couple of, well, I'd say 6 weeks or so. We're certainly looking on the Facebook group. There are more and more people popping up with, the first or second videos and episodes, which is great. The more people talking about it, the better.
That's great. But I'm sure we'll see that thin out in the coming months as enthusiasms change and focus changes when Bolt Action version 3 finally adds more to our life.
Yeah. Cool. So tonight we're going to talk about tournaments. We're going to sort of have a think about V3 and what we know so far and how that might apply to tournaments. And then Ali's joined us to talk about 2 of the events coming up that he's running up in Scotland. So Jonny, I'm going to throw this over to you to kick us off.
I presume you've been following all the V3 rumours and pre-releases. What are your thoughts so far, Ali? Are you getting pretty excited for it all?
I am trying to keep a happy, neutral stance on this. And for 2 reasons. I don't want to absorb the negativity because that'll make me feel down. But I don't want to get too excited because I don't want to get let down. And I know that might be a strange stance because I don't have any fire or brimstone to deal out, but I'm happy that it's on the way because it's been a long time coming. But there has been no single thing that I have seen that has triggered me to, throw the toys up in the air. Which I would like though is for the internet to try and take on board that same mentality. There's no point losing sleep over this stuff. It's happening. It's coming. And when the books arrive on your doorstep, that's the time to be happy or be sad. So up until this point, the new platoon structure, I'm on board with. Actually, there was one thing that did blow me away. The changes to the machine guns on vehicles. We have heard people moan about overpowered Daka Stewart's other tanks for years. Why did none of us think to just do this? We are
cut it in half.
Half it. Why did nobody come up with this solution before? How thick are we? It's like just leave the points the same, half the shots, and then all of a sudden, is it solved? It's better. It's better. So no, those are the quick takeaways already. But the platoon structure, I can see already the different potentials that that'll bring, and I'm not upset by it.
Yeah, I think similar to you, the platoon structure absolutely has caught my eye, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that will work in terms of the points cost and what changes, if any or many there are. Marcus has said that they were play testing at 1250, so it'd be interesting to see how that pans out when you start putting multiple platoons and the required points to get those multiple platoons. And I think like you as well, I've certainly obviously been reading all the articles and paying attention, and individually I've personally kept quiet, and as as Tabletop Tommies we've kept quiet because we just want to see what happens. We want to see how it all falls out and how it all comes together. I think it's been really good how they've released the info, but I don't want to get carried away, and I don't want to start throwing things out or getting too excited because seeing one rule or seeing a couple of rules in isolation, we don't know how they fall together relative to other things that haven't been discussed or haven't been said yet. So as soon as the books are in our hands and as soon as we can talk about it, absolutely we'll get more and more vocal. But for the moment, I'm enjoying what I'm seeing. Cover saves, I don't have an opinion either way about it. I play games where cover saves exist, and obviously version 2 didn't. It doesn't bother me that way. The platoon structure is something I'm really, really excited for. Definitely,
yeah. I think that platoon structure is the one that is sort of the key change there, because it's basically brought theaters into the generic. because those specialist platoons are basically what the theatre selectors were giving you, and so I think that's a huge win. From the other side, though, there is, if you did just want to run one mortar, one artillery piece, you could potentially be slightly irked by having to run extra platoons. But I think overall, it's going to be a really positive change. And that machine gun tank thing, I think that one was one where there are some tanks that would really suffer under that. But I think there's going to be enough other sort of like slight supplemental changes that the entire balance is going to shift. And so you can't just look at the machine guns in isolation. I think the whole system's going to cause you to... And all these releases, really, like, you can't really knee-jerk to them until you see the entire rule set and how it all goes together.
With that talk, though, about the entire rule set, a judgment call I made amongst a group of friends in Scotland, and I'll make the call here, is that I believe that the generic reinforced platoon from version 2 and effectively the same thing from version 1, I think it'll linger in version 3, simply because all the different platoons, theatre platoons, the generic reinforced platoon, and then the new, 6 different platoons? The rifle, engineer, tank, heavy support, whatever they are.
Armoured, heavy weapon, recce, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All the platoons are doing is giving structure for gaming to create an illusion of balance, whatever you want to call it. But if you wanted to play bolt action, literally, you can see in the video, if you're watching this, I could reach over to my first shelf of Germans and lift it off, divide it into units, and then play with it. It doesn't have to be in a platoon structure of any sort of semblance. So I believe for maybe the first year or so that the GRP, I think, will still be in use, unless there is some ruling within the main book that itself that would limit that. I believe it'll still be a thing. In the same way that when we go on to talk about tournaments, and my own tournament format, the Megatron 3000, which exclusively uses theatre selectors, this is a hope, but it's also a belief that the theatre selectors may, on the whole, still be valid, because all they are doing is rearranging the different available units that players can buy. So if I pick up the Market Garden Fallschirmjäger Regiment 6, all I need is the version 3 entry for the Fallschirmjäger Infantry. And that's it. Then you can still use that platoon. So it is great to have different platoon structures, but
absolutely,
it's can take a breath. If you really do want to still play with a GRP with your one inexperienced medium mortar in Denmark, or your one flamethrower team, then I believe you'll still be able to do that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. They haven't really said much about what's going to happen with campaign books and theatre selectors, but I think you're absolutely right. The theatre selectors and the history obviously isn't going to change, and so your campaign book is going to be legitimate for quite a long time, I imagine, until they release sort of an update to it. But I can't see them doing that because there's so many areas of the war that they haven't dug into deeply yet that I imagine what they'll do is they'll do those campaign books first before we revisit any fronts again. That would be my hope, realistically.
It's an interesting one. I, playing on what you're saying about the books, I've got quite a firm belief, though, that the army books, when they arrive, are going to be pretty fat. They'll be pretty thick. So what I foresee the book sort of formats moving forward is that whatever they do with campaign books, I don't think we'll see new units in them at all. I think it'll just be filler text, maybe theatre selector platoons, or more more scenarios specific to those areas of the war. I don't think we'll see new units because currently from version 2, I think they're all out. Aren't they? Unless you want to go, I know there's people in the obscure world that they want some sort of Egyptian camel riding, rifle toting, grenade wielding guys from 1942 August through September, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Or Spanish Civil War. Sure, that's a different theatre of pre-war stuff, but I think you can extract from version 2 the units, update them, repoint them, and then put them in an enormous army book and let that book stand the test of time for version 3, I believe.
Yeah, I think one of the things that points towards that, and one of the things that actually I thought was a really good move and showed that they've listened to the community was, and I can't remember exactly how Marcus worded it, but they'd basically paid attention to the fact that people were complaining that you have the same special rule in 6 different books, slightly differently worded, and so they've tried to bring all that into the main rule set, which I think does lend a lot of weight to your idea that actually the army books are going to be big, but then the campaign books aren't going to have loads of quirky stuff like we've seen in V2.
No, I don't believe so. But again, that's just it's a hope and a belief. It's something that I believe will happen, and I actually hope does happen. God, I know I'm going to go off tangent for you guys, but and it maybe it will act as a segue to tournaments and tournament play for version 3. But I was thinking that I've survived version 1 and the change to version 2, and it was good. And I was thinking about this, the meta that is always spoken about in tournament circles. And I was remembering back to the version 1 Recce rule. Did you guys, either of you guys play version 1?
Yeah, Puma Fest.
Yeah, exactly. I nailed it on the head.
Yeah, I joined just after that, so I came in as everyone was hating on the Pumas, but without due cause because we'd already swapped the rules around.
Well, that's it. So, but for your listeners that don't know, in version 1, if a vehicle had the Recce rule, they could Recce once, regardless if they'd activated or not. And one of the vehicles that had Recce was the German Puma, with its medium anti-tank gun, armor 8, armored car, wheeled, dual directional steering. An amazing piece of kit. So this thing would just fire forward, pick off a tank, it would explode, somebody would fire back, and then go, Recce, woof. So you actually had to have 2 shots to get it. You had to have a backup to the backup. And Pumas were just everywhere. I remember the joke was that there was more Pumas at a tournament than were actually ever built or used in the war.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went to version 2 and they rectified Recce and it was better. But, and this is where we get to the meta, or the meta chasing. The Puma wasn't the only vehicle that had Recce or had that ability in version 1. The Staghound was available through the British Army book, which had remained unchanged into version 2. So when we got to version 2, it actually took years for the meta to solidify to the Gurkhas, to the Stuarts, to the Staghounds in the armoured car section. And one of the reasons I believe that happened was down to model availability. Because in version 1, we saw the Pumas because there was a plastic kit. But there was never a good accessible model for something like the Staghound. I think maybe towards the tail end, Die Waffenkammer out of Canada was producing them. And then as we got into V2, it took a couple of years, but then the onset of 3D printing and more companies like Rubicon focusing in on bolt action as a source of income, they then started to produce the models so the meta could quickly, we all of a sudden had all the options and we could get access to them. It wasn't just, we've all got a Puma because it's a plastic kit, but we can all get access to everything. If I swung the camera around, I can reach over to the 3D printer, whack some files in, and then boom, within 8 hours, I'll have 3 Humber armored cars. Within 3 days, they'll be painted, tabletop ready, good to go. So what I'm aiming for here is that when we get into version 3, the meta will solidify fast because we've got access to everything in terms of models, the rules, because we'll all be based off the army, well, the rule book, the get you buy lists, but the change from the armies and the main rule book won't be huge leaps when they go to the armies of books, just because your basic rifle guys is still going to be the same. You'll just have a few more ways to field them. So the meta for version 3 will solidify really quick in the tournament scene within 6 months. We'll know what is going to work. And then it's going to be down to tournament organizers to adjust formats to make it change. That's just a belief I've got, and it's only a recently formed one in the past couple of days when I knew I was going to be talking on your podcast.
I think the model availability is absolutely valid, and not even talking about the meta, but take the French for example. Prior to War Games Atlantic releasing their French plastic kit, you very rarely saw French armies because it was expensive to build them. You either having to kit bash a huge amount or you having to buy them in metal. War Games Atlantic came out obviously with their French kit, and we started to see them more and more. And now with the Warlord Games having their own French plastic kit, you're seeing them, and it's exactly the same, like you said, with the Staghound becoming available through 3D prints, STLs, etc. So yeah, I think it's a really good point that it shouldn't take long to work out, for those tournament players and competitive players, what works well within the points cost and within the restrictions.
Yep.
And you've got the models available, or you can get them, like you said, you can download and print them off, paint them in 3 days, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I think it'll very much depend on how much the army books do differ from the main rulebook. So if the difference is sort of V2 difference, like that's because basically what's going to happen is they're going to slowly release those army books over, I think, about 2 years, they said. And so if there are nuances being added every time, that could really just keep pushing the meta slightly. And it doesn't take a lot to completely shift stuff. As you say, just changing that Recce rule completely took the Pumas off the table almost entirely to just the people who, because they're not a bad buy, but they're not sort of the overpowered thing that they used to be in V1.
Well, the German thing changed with. I know we're sort of talking very much the history of the bolt action game now, but the German army book was the first out in V1, and it was the only one updated in version 2 because it needed an update, and that's where Tiger Fear solved that problem. So the Puma went, and the Panzer IV was in. I know because I am that guy. I was that guy. That's why I've got an enormous German collection because I've lived through all the iterations of it. So I guess, look, special rules for the armies might make the difference, but the difference in unit availability from the version 2 rulebook compared to the army books, it's not a huge difference in terms of when you really get down to sort of units that you want to use. It's not that much.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it's sort of inexperienced regular veteran rifleman with some specialist units, be that, commandos, paratroopers, whatever. You've got some support weapons, you've got some, artillery, anti-tank guns, anti-aircraft guns, and you've got a selection of vehicles. And like you say, most of the army's books just expand upon that selection. It's the campaign books where we've seen those more niche specialist units coming in, some of which you never see at events because they're very specific to that campaign book and that period of the war, and they're not worth bringing. Others, like Gurkha Paras, for example, have become a mainstay of certain lists in the tournament scene. So, yeah.
Pretty much so.
Yeah, I mean, jumping into Megatron, what I was wondering about Megatron was what's going to happen next year, do you expect, basically? But before you answer that, I think it'd probably be good to give an overview of what Megatron is for anyone listening. That's right.
So for me, I created the Megatron 3000 bolt action tournament, and this is going into its 3rd year. And it stems from one conversation. It stems from one conversation I had with a player. He was having a big ass moan about campaign books and how there was no point to them because all they did was come out. There was a couple of units that people would cherry pick to use, and then the whole book would just get ditched. There's theatre selectors, and he went on and on and on. And I actually listened to this rant, and then I reacted to it. And I created the format being that, so it's a single theatre selector platoon, 1,250 points, and it's an 18 order dice cap. The difference being, though, that the only theatre selectors that are allowed to be used are from campaign books, with a second provision that once a selector is picked, nobody else can have it. So it's a very first come, first served. If you've got an idea for your army, you have to be right on there at day one of ticket sales. And they went on sale last October, and there were 24 players that had bought tickets within the first hour.
Yeah, it's a very canny idea that just sell out your ticket straight away, because if you've got something you're dead set on, you best buy that ticket today.
Yep, it's absolutely lethal. It's a great marketing ploy, and it works. It's worked every year. You've got people just waiting there ready to click because they've got a plan. But it also means that when armies come to the tournament, they're all more or less unique. So one of the fears I had when I was creating the format was that I didn't know what was out there in the campaign books. I owned all the books because I was cherry picking units for myself, like any good tournament player would. So I didn't know what was out there. So I was worried that there was some um, mega weapon of a theater selector, like people always think of the theater selector from the Soviet army book, Silo Heights.
Silo Heights, yeah.
Yep, or Stalingrad from the army book. So
from the army, yeah.
That's why I cancelled out the army book selectors. Also because they were old. All the army books, bar in Germany, they were old books. So I didn't want to dip into them, whereas all the new campaign books were worthy of the attention. And going from there, it's been a success. And this year, I've got a sellout of 46 players again, and that's the capacity for the venue. And I don't want to try and push it any further. Yes, I don't want to change venue because the venue I've chosen is Common Ground Games in Stirling, operated by a gentleman called Steve, and it is 10 minutes from my doorstep. I don't want to go anywhere else. Plus, Steve's service is great, and the venue can easily accommodate the players without there being without any sort of crampedness of space. No bums touching each other. The sort of stuff that wargamers don't like.
Sure.
So the Megatron 3000 sits within what I always like to think of as the Scottish calendar, the Scottish menu for bolt action events. And one of the aspects of the event is that I commit to making sure there's a prize for everybody, which isn't done elsewhere in the Scottish calendar. We do a lot of raffles for charity, returned servicemen's leagues, Royal British Legion, and also for the different gaming clubs that put on events. So there are prizes that go to people, but they're just delivered in a different sort of way. To make that happen, I do have to read out a list of sponsors. So
yeah, I was going to say, with 46 players, if everyone's getting something, you must have quite a few sponsors on the ticket there,
I have worked really hard, but I'm just going from the top of the list to the bottom of the list. I'm not playing any great favourites here, but
in no particular order is this, rather than
in
alphabetical?
no particular order. No, there's just alphabetical. So Warlord Games, they're a very obvious one, but they've come out with one of their bigger support packages. So there's the Gold Order dice are present. Osprey Publishing, so the guys that actually make the books, they've sent a little care package along. Any Scale Miniatures, they're a printing company based in Scotland. One thing I always like to talk about them is that their range of destroyed battlefield debris is always one of my favourites, like blown up cars, blown up trucks, the stuff that actually pads out a battlefield.
Yep.
First Corps, I'm really proud that First Corps have supported us again this year. I'm sure there's a lot of people in the community that are aware their website blew up a month or so ago, along with a few other businesses in the Nottingham area. So First Corps have sent a package of prize support along. So I'm really glad that they managed to do that. KO Designs or Coed Designs out of Sweden, they are produce dice bags.
Oh, what have you got in your dice bags? Is it a Megatron specific dice bag?
No, they're army units, special ones. So I'm sure we've got a US 8th Army and Africa Corps, and they also have done one for the Blood Bowl event that I run on the same weekend. 3D Printing Valley, online producer. I think it's nice that we actually talk about the 3D printers, but they've produced a good prize support package again for this year. War Games Atlantic, who we've already mentioned, a gentleman over there called Gaz. I can see them from here, 3 infantry boxes, plus a pack of, I never knew they did these, textured bases.
Oh, interesting. What's the texture on them?
I'm going to go with sand.
Okay, so you don't have to actually put any base material on them. You can just dry brush them, basically.
Really freaked me out, but I never knew they did them.
That's nice.
We've got a business called Overlord Games. So they're a online third-party supplier of different wargaming products. Yeah. And they've provided us with, I think it's like 6 or 8 Vallejo box sets of different army theme paints, which I was really proud of them supplying that. They actually asked me. I never like asking specifically for stuff from sponsors. It's just like whatever you're happy to give me. But I actually had an idea for them, and they were happy to support it.
So is that like a set of colours?
Yeah, I don't have
because that's
one to
quite
hand.
useful, to be fair. Because I don't know if Warlords still do that, but I'm sure they used to, where you could just buy a box set and you get all the paints you need to paint your Fallschirmjäger or whatever specific army you've got.
That's exactly it. And there's also a couple of box sets of which is called utility paints. So it's just like those generic colours for jerry cans, canvases, just stuff that can be done across all armies.
Cool.
We've also got Alba Studios. Alba are a company based up in Aberdeen. They're a 3D printing and commission painting business. So they're a great one-stop shop. And they were also a huge supplier of scenery to the D-Day Replayed campaign weekend that was run a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Game Mat EU, we know them, neoprene mats. Mardav, another 3D printing company, they've got a really great Etsy store. And I did a winter German paint guide on one of their Kugelblitzes a little while ago. I got this really great one from Italy, Uppsala Miniatures. Have you ever heard of them? You really have now. If you are in the market for Italian cavalry, and I think everybody should be in version 2, Uppsala Miniatures, yeah, they're great. I got a sample of them. They're absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, let's fingers
guy.
crossed that we keep the double charge cavalry, otherwise their sales are going to go up and down and up and down.
I know, God bless them. We've also got Micro Art Studio, scenery company based out of Poland, and they do the pre-printed, pre-colored MDF terrain.
They're lovely.
Have you guys experienced it before? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely lovely. Yeah.
Absolutely stunning stuff. It's a premium product. I have to say that it is expensive, but it's a premium product, and it is just fantastic. The attention to detail, especially when you've got buildings that have got 3 levels. All the floors are coloured, and then if you lift off the last level, they've got the ruins template underneath if the building gets destroyed, and it's just brilliant. Speechless. I love their products.
I've got to say this thanking the sponsors has turned into a hobby half hour, hasn't it? We're getting all the tips here.
Well, I'm not just going to shout their names out. I've got to talk about what they do.
Oh, that's brilliant.
but I am almost done. I've also got Demonscape. Now, Demonscape they're producing the trophies for the Megatron 3000. They're based in Elgin in the north of Scotland. And they also do gaming aids and gaming tools. So for other games like movement trays, but they also do turn counters, dice counters, and pin markers. So it's well worth a visit for something unique. Oh, and he's a dice producer as well. I do love a dice producer. We've also got Mighty Minis UK. They are based in Whitburn in Scotland. They're another 3D printing company. And to finish off, Deep Cut Studios, again, another producer of gaming mats, and Artist Opus paintbrushes. Our best painted army will get a box set of those.
Yeah.
I think that's all from my list. Thank you, listeners. That was the sponsors of the Megatron 3000.
That is like the greatest hits of bolt action, suppliers and producers. Everybody you've mentioned, it's like, yep, tick, 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 tick.
Guys, you should see the list of people that said no.
Okay.
It's like the opposite. It's like the B side.
But we won't show that list because they said no.
No, they said no. But again, though, in the current economic climate, I'm just amazed that so many companies said yes.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
And if companies say no, that is great. That's no problem. I'm just happy to have got the response. So yeah. But again, that's the Megatron 3000, and that's how it plays out. And to have a sellout year again for the 46 players, I'm really happy, really proud of the work. So
yeah.
And have you got many staying for day 2 and playing Blood Bowl? Because
I haven't got a final list. So what you're alluding to there is my other passion, which is Blood Bowl. So on the Sunday, I run a Blood Bowl event, and that's called the Megatron Mega Bowl. And if there are players that play on both days, they compete for the Megatron Cup.
Yeah.
and there's no great maths to it. You just have to finish, high to get points. But those players, they get a few little special prizes. They get some special dice to use over the both days. And I talk them up. I embarrass them quite a lot. I think last year we had 8 players. I think this year we might have 8 again. And the Blood Bowl side of things, there are, I think there's like 44 players at the moment. So there's always capacity for Blood Bowl, but nope. Those are the 2 days. I am absolutely wrecked.
Yeah, I was going to say,
after 2 days.
Yeah, holiday needed next week after that.
Well, I wish it was. My little boy, he has his first day of school the following week, so it's going to be all systems go.
Yeah,
brilliant. Well, jumping back to my original sort of question, what are you expecting next year for Megatron? Are you expecting very similar format where, because I mean, we're expecting theatre selectors to exist in some sort of way going forward.
Yep.
So similar format, and then I guess the other question is, when will tickets be released? Are you going to leave a good gap after V3 launches to give people time to sort of bed in before you put the tickets out?
Like, this is a tricky one, and I actually don't know. I don't want to make any. I'm really sad that I don't know. I mean, I've already spoken that hope that the theatre selectors will exist or will be usable, because all we need are the unit profiles to fill the theatre selector gaps. But there's a lot of theatre selectors that are good fun, but the units are just a little bit more obscure. And I'm sure if the army books were all out, it would work. But I think by the time we get to the Megatron 3000 next year, there may be 2. Germany will definitely be out. There's the potential.
US, I think, is confirmed via other online retailers as April.
Okay.
And if it's 1 a quarter, in theory, July maybe for the third one, but it's certainly not going to be 6 or 7 or 8 if it's a schedule of 1 a quarter.
Yeah. So it's going to be. I mean, I'm definitely going to have to hold off on ticket sales until this year I went in October. I think for the next one I'll have maybe hold off until mid-November, just before the Christmas sort of expenditure kicks in for people for life, and it'll also give us the opportunity to see some version 3 events run.
Yes.
So I know that in Scotland the final event of the year is in November, and it's called Winter War, and it's held in Dunfermline by the club there, and it is historically the most cutthroat event in Scotland. It is absolutely balls deep, hardcore, and competitive gamers, heaven, casual gamers, white hot nightmare. So I hope we do that to see how far we can push it. But the Megatron 3000 will run in 2025 in August in some way, shape, or form. Whether or not I have to do a year or 2 of standard feeling tournaments, we'll see. Or maybe if I have to pick, 6 theatre books that can function, and then let players take multiples of those theatre selectors. I need to work it out, but no, it's going to be. It'll run.
Yeah, watch this space, I guess.
Yeah,
brilliant. And then, actually, talking of tournaments, I think I'm correct in saying the Scottish Nationals is going to be pretty much the last 2-day tournament of V2.
Yes.
I can't imagine there's another one, even outside of the UK, because it's very close to the release date of V3, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So version 3 is due to ship. I don't have my calendar, but I'm sure it's like a Thursday.
Yeah, 26th, Thursday the 26th.
Thursday the 26th. And the Scottish Nationals run on the Saturday and Sunday, the 21st and 22nd of September. So 1, 2. So like 3 sleeps after the Scottish Nationals finish, people get their version 3 rule books. And the Scottish Nationals also runs on Warlords Open Day weekend thing.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
So,
correct.
So people will be getting their version 3 rule books on that weekend, if they're not coming to the Scottish Nationals. So the Scottish Nationals itself, as you said, in theory, maybe will be the last second edition fully competitive tournament anywhere in the world. I'll make that call. Anywhere in the globe, take that world.
Yeah, unless
And
there's a Monday, Tuesday tournament.
yeah, or unless Thursday morning, before the postman cut. Yeah, it's happening in Scotland. So it's players' last chance to run the Gurkha Paras, run the Daka Stewards, crack out the multi-launchers, and do your worst. The format is single generic reinforced platoon, full unit access, 1,100 points. I'm sure I put an order ice cap, but it's somewhere in the region of 24, so it's not really a factor. And 5 games, 2 days. Tickets are still available. They are £40. The various payment details, etc., are on the event page itself. So if you search on social media on Facebook for Scottish Nationals, and it's called Scottish Nationals, a Band of Brothers, just because it's a whole bunch of Scottish guys that are putting on, but I am the lead person,
The lead Scot.
the lead Scot that's going to be doing that. It's moving to a more, not community-based event, but an event that's the tournament organizer is going to pass the baton to someone else within the community
Oh, that's
Okay.
to make
interesting.
yeah, so it doesn't rest with one person,
Yeah.
so that it's because we've all got our own events. I know that I mentioned the club in Dunfermline, they run 2 events a year, Winter War, which we've spoken about, which is absolutely lethal and I love it. But they also run a doubles event in the February called Spring Offensive, where you just get together with your pal and it's hilarious and it's good fun and it's like a palate cleanser from the winter to get you back into frame of mind. There's guys up in Aberdeen, they run a beginner event. It's like 1,000 points generic reinforced platoon. Then they do a 1,500 point tank war in October. And then all through the year, there's different clubs and different organisations have their own events. So we thought with the Scottish Nationals, that should be the event that's inclusive of the community. So everybody can have some sort of feedback or way to take part in it, in the organising of it. So my idea this year, I wrote the pack for 1,100 points. Obviously, people will understand that that's very close to what World Open War, the team event, is.
Correct. Yeah.
And I was motivated by that
Yeah.
to give the Scottish team a final warm up before going to the event, and also to see if there was anybody within the UK or outside the UK that had time to travel to do a warm up practice event for the event in Southend. Something I am doing differently this year, though, is prizes. So Warlord Games have given us a basic prize package that was at my request, and that will cover first, second, and third. What I'm now doing is I'm canvassing Scottish businesses, exclusively Scottish companies, and I hope this term transfers over to the rest of the world. But do you guys know what a munchie box is?
No.
Oh, guys are crazy. So
Okay.
if you go to a like a takeaway kebab shop
Yeah.
in Scotland, you can get a munchie box, and inside a munchie box you'll get some pakora, chips, curry sauce, kebab meat, naan breads. You'll just get like a little selection box
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
of a heart attack.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Just get a munchie box. If you can't think of what to get, just get a box with a bit of everything in it.
Okay.
And so what I'm doing is I'm hoping to put together 5 or 6 of these. I'll call them selection boxes, just in case your audience don't buy into the munchie box concept, so that we can give out a taste of what Scottish businesses can do for the wargaming industry. And that'll go into the hands at this stage of our I'm going to call them our foreign visitors, but players that originate from outside of Scotland. They'll have to do something cool to win them. They're not just going to be handed out just because you're Johnny Foreigner and you've turned up.
Sure.
But I understand that the Scottish players will have just come from Megatron 3000, whereas it's just, you walk through the door and there's prizes just cascading down from the ceiling, and that's why it forms part of this sort of Scottish community, Scottish wargaming bolt action calendar or menu, so you can pick and choose what you want to take part in. So that's the Scottish Nationals, and also it would go without saying that it is the third and final round of the bolt action British Nationals.
British Championship. Yeah.
British Championship, yes, sorry, that's correct. The British Championship. So going before that, we've had England and we've had Wales. Wales looked like it was an enormous success in Cardiff with a really high player count. And it finishes off in Scotland. So if anybody really wants to be the British champion, you'd better be in Scotland to try and get your munchie box.
Yeah, and looking at the names that are signed up currently that you've put up on the post, there's 5 or 6 players there from Wales and England who have been to both the English and the Welsh nationals. So obviously going up to Scotland to support the event, but also with an eye on the overall British Championship, I would imagine.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I know you you run a Scottish Championship as well, don't you, just for the Scots? So is the Scottish Nationals going to be the last event of that, with it being the last V2 event, and then start the new league, if you will, from that day forward?
No. So
interesting.
So at the Scottish Nationals, whatever Scottish player finishes the highest they'll get a trophy and a pat in the back. But the Scottish Championship runs throughout the calendar year, and there's different criteria for the events to qualify. And it has to be Swiss, has to be true Swiss, so it can't be red on blue all the way through. There has to be a minimum number of players, has to be advertised a certain amount of time out, and all the organisers can opt in or out as they see fit. If they're worried that it might attract the wrong element to their event. And the Scottish champion to become Scottish champion, you can only count your best 3 results. So it's not a matter of who can attend every event in Scotland. That doesn't matter. You get to count your best 3 results, and there are bonus points for using multiple nations. So it's not like, a player can turn up, win 3 events using a British Gurkha paralist and become Scottish champion. They'll only get 30 points. So it's 10 points for a victory. 10 points for a victory, then it's like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But you get 2 bonus points for using a second nation, and then I think it's 4 bonus points for using a third nation. So there's 6 bonus points available to do that. So the Scottish Championship the final event will be Winter War in November, and that's when the trophies are awarded for that. So the maximum score a Scottish player can get is 36 points. Doesn't matter how many events you go to, that's the most you can ever get. If there are players that all land on that points level, then there's different tiebreakers in the background that can sort that out. So no, it will be the Scottish Championship will run all the way through to November, and regardless of the version change, it'll just have to go with it.
Nice. Well, that'll be really helpful actually if we do see sufficient changes that certain nations get a bit of a boost, then actually that criteria of using a different army will get a real nice help there, where if suddenly the French are amazing in V3, coming out with your French, extra 2 bonus points and a good chance of winning.
Yep, that's exactly it. And what I should say as well is, for that Scottish Championship, that forms the basis of how the Scottish international teams are formed. So it means that players, let's take the WTC for instance, it's teams of 4. So when we come to select our WTC team, the players in first, second, and third automatically get offered a place because they've helped the Scottish community, they've achieved tournament victories, or they've been on the podiums, and you would hope as well that they've proven a proficiency in more than one nation, so they're not just a one-trick pony. And then the captain has a choice, a captain's pick, And if the captain sits outside of the top three, he picks himself. But such is life. And if anybody from that top three drops out, the place gets automatically passed down to the next player in the championship. So it's very much if you want to be part of the international Scottish team, turn up to domestic Scottish events, play games, support the community, do well, and regardless of who you are, is where you place, and then you qualify for the team.
And it's nice and transparent, and it's
completely,
like you said, it's rewarding consistency, it's rewarding attendance, and the fact you intimated that by taking a different nation, you're not getting rewarded for turning up 3 or 4 times with the same nation and doing very well, but not being able to play that second or third nation, which in a team event can be important, because if you don't want your top 4 players to all be very proficient in 1 or maybe 2 nations when you've got to select, for example, WTC and World Open War, you have to select unique nations per player, as both events are currently written. Yeah.
That's exactly it. And for myself, I actually plan my tournament year based upon that. So I'll look ahead to the first sort of 4 or 5 tournaments, and my plan is to take a different nation to each one of those. Because once you've if you win an event with the Soviets, that's it. For the rest of the year, they're in the cabinet. They don't get to come out ever again for the rest of the year. Because you're trying to make sure that you're pushing yourself as a player to have that knowledge and experience with different nations, so that you're not just relying on body armored engineers or Gurkha Paras or whatever picks that you like to do. So it's a good system.
Yeah, it sounds it, and I'm hoping the V3 will encourage that as well, where we can't just take our finely tuned V2 armies to a V3 event, because it just may be that they don't work anymore. So we're going to have to lean into other nations or look at other units within the nation that we're comfortable with.
Yep, just use those nations differently, as you said. I think it was Jonny that said you don't just get to turn up with 1 mortar, 1 flamethrower. You if you want 1, you have to take 2.
Yeah.
Or if you want those engineer units, then you're going to have to invest more points to get them. It'll be an interesting balance. One that I'm excited for.
Yeah, I'm quite excited for it, because it's very much like what I was saying. During V2, I always said if it was worth taking 1, he should be taking at least 2. And so, from my perspective, these new platoons competitively are great, and thematically they're great because they are probably more representative of what we actually saw at the time.
But it's if you think on the new platoon structure versus the old, if you had to take 2 generic reinforced platoons, that's kind of leaning into if you have a rifle platoon, a tank platoon, a heavy, whatever they call heavy support artillery platoons,
heavy weapons, I think. Yeah, but
So if you wanted to take a twin, if you wanted to take the twin Daka Stuart backed up by the airborne jeeps, that's a tank platoon now.
Yeah,
there it is.
So you were going to take 2 mortars more than likely if you were taking a double generic platoon.
Yeah.
So you've done that in the heavy weapons platoon. Yeah.
I think the only difficulty becomes is when you want to get your engineers in. That's where you sometimes you'd only like to just take 1 engineer unit.
Speak for yourself.
Well,
it's not all of us, yeah.
Yeah, and that's, to be honest, I'm delighted about it. Engineering platoons is a really interesting thing that really you are always just sort of like, it was seen as ultra competitive, but I think that the changes to engineers, there's a lot of little things going on there. Like, for example, now you don't get defended positions in a house when engineers assault you, which I think is going to change the way engineers work. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see what the sort of the wider effects are. But I'll be taking probably loads, I imagine, still.
Well, I would imagine your standard army will now be 2 rifle platoons, 2 engineer platoons. Isn't that what you need to get to double up on the special platoons? You need a second rifle platoon.
Yeah. 14 or 15 flamethrowers suddenly, yeah.
But with that, guys, we've talked about the 2 tournaments that I'm involved in, which I'm really thankful for to be on your podcast.
Well, thanks for coming on, Ali. It's been genuinely interesting hearing about Megatron and how successful it still is, because I know the last couple have been absolute barnstormers. So well done selling out like once more. And I imagine next year will be exactly the same. The Scottish Nationals as well. I think that's really interesting what you're doing there, where you're making it more of a community event. So where can people buy tickets for the Scottish Nationals if they haven't got
Scottish
theirs yet?
Nationals. So if you are on Facebook, which I fully expect you to be so, if you just punch in a search for Bolt Action Scottish Nationals, it will pull up an event. It's got a image from the Band of Brothers television show as the landing page. And when you get in there, there are details on how you can PayPal myself the ticket fee. And there's also the player pack there as well. As we've already covered, 1,100 points, single generic reinforced platoon, basically all unit access. So go nuts. It's your last chance.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for coming on.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Ali. Good luck this weekend. Good luck with the Scottish Nationals. And we will see you in Southend in October.
Ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now.
I do listen to your podcast all the time.